A storm changes the course of a life when a pregnant woman is betrayed by the man who swore to protect her. Torn between loyalty and desire, he chooses to save his mistress and abandons his wife on the brink of death. But fate, merciless and just, rescues her from the waters and offers her a second chance. Now, with her daughter in her arms and truth as her ally, she returns to confront the silence and reclaim what was taken from her. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you will ever hear in your life. The rain fell like blades on the asphalt of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco that March night. Marina held the seatbelt so tightly that her fingers were already white. Her 6-month belly pressed against the fabric, and every curve the car took made her more tense. She looked at the driver's seat, where Richard drove with his eyes fixed on the road, his jaw clenched. In the passenger seat, Julia nervously fiddled with her phone without saying a word. Marina couldn't understand how they had gotten there. Hours earlier, she was at home preparing dinner when Richard arrived in a hurry, saying they needed to leave immediately. There was an urgent meeting in Oakland across the bay, and he needed her to come along. Marina found it strange because she had never participated in her husband's work meetings, but he insisted so much that she ended up agreeing. When she got into the car and saw Julia already sitting in the passenger seat, her heart froze. Julia was Richard's partner in the export company, a beautiful and always elegant woman whom Marina never fully trusted. The wind shook the car as they crossed the bridge. Marina tried to strike up a conversation a few times, but both Richard and Julia seemed distant, lost in their own thoughts. The storm had formed quickly, catching everyone by surprise. The radio warned of winds up to 50 miles per hour and recommended people avoid leaving home. Marina suggested they turn back, but Richard said they were already halfway there and it would be faster to continue. That's when the bang happened, a dry thud, followed by an abrupt swerve. The car skidded, and Marina felt her stomach lurch when they realized they were out of control. Richard struggled with the steering wheel, but the vehicle no longer obeyed his commands. Julia screamed. Marina instinctively held her belly, protecting the baby. The windshield was completely fogged by the rain, and she could barely see where they were going. When the car finally stopped, it was sideways on the bridge, dangerously close to the guardrail. Marina could hear the sound of the turbulent bay below, the waves crashing furiously against the bridge's pillars. Her heart pounded so hard she felt the pulsations in her neck. Richard quickly got out of the car, checking the damage. Julia also got out despite the torrential rain. Marina tried to open the door, but it was locked. She banged on the window, calling Richard, but he seemed not to hear over the noise of the storm. That's when she realized the car was moving. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, but it was moving. The wind pushed the vehicle towards the guardrail. Marina felt panic take over her. She screamed louder, banged harder on the window. Richard looked back. His eyes met hers for a second that seemed an eternity. He took a step towards the car, but Julia held his arm, saying something Marina couldn't hear. What happened in the following seconds would be etched forever in Marina's memory. Richard hesitated. He looked at Julia, then at the car, then back at Julia. The expression on his face was one of agony, as if he were being torn in half. Julia pulled his arm harder, pointing to the edge of the bridge, where there was a safe spot away from the car. And then Richard made the choice that would change everything. He ran with Julia to the opposite side of the bridge, moving away from the vehicle. Marina couldn't believe what she was seeing. She struggled desperately with the door, with the seatbelt, with everything. The car continued to slide slowly. She managed to open the window a few inches, enough for the rain to come in and wet her face, mixing with the tears that were already flowing freely. She screamed Richard's name until her throat hurt. He was standing at the edge of the bridge, holding Julia, watching the car move. His lips moved as if he was saying something, but Marina couldn't hear. The impact against the guardrail was less than she expected, but it was enough to make the car sway dangerously. Marina could see the dark ocean below through the partially open window. She thought of the baby, of the life growing inside her, of the family she imagined building. She thought of all the promises Richard had made, of all the dreams they had shared. How had they come to this point? How was the man who promised to love and protect her standing there meters away doing nothing? The guardrail gave way with a metallic groan. Marina felt the car tilt and knew it was the end. She closed her eyes and placed her hands over her belly, whispering a prayer her grandmother had taught her when she was a child. The world seemed to move in slow motion. She opened her eyes one last time and saw Richard running towards the car, his hand outstretched, his mouth open in a silent scream. But it was too late. The fall was quick and brutal. The car spun in the air before hitting the water. The impact knocked all the air from Marina's lungs. The icy water flooded the vehicle through, the broken windows rising rapidly. She fought against the seatbelt with the last strength she had, but her fingers were too numb to unlock the mechanism. The water was already at chest height when she finally managed to free herself. She swam towards the window, but the current was too strong. The car was sinking rapidly, pulling her down with it. Marina hit her shoulder against something hard, felt a sharp pain, but kept fighting. She needed to get out. She needed to survive. For the baby, for herself, to make Richard pay for what he had done. She managed to get through the window when the car was almost completely submerged. She swam upwards with all the strength left in her tired body. Her lungs burned, begging for air. Her legs felt like lead. Her belly made every movement more difficult, but she couldn't give up. She wouldn't give up. When she finally broke the surface, she gasped for air in desperate gulps. The rain was still falling hard, and the waves pushed her from side to side. She tried to swim towards the shore, but the current carried her away. She screamed for help, but her voice was too weak to compete with the noise of the storm. She saw lights on the bridge above her, small bright spots that seemed miles away. The cold was starting to take over her. Her limbs became heavier and slower. Marina knew she wouldn't be able to swim much longer. She turned on her back, trying to float to conserve energy. She thought of Richard again, of the look of horror on his face when the car fell. Was he regretting it now? Did he finally understand what he had done? Or was he relieved to have saved Julia? The anger she felt at that moment warmed her from within, giving her a last surge of energy. She wouldn't let him win. She wouldn't let that betrayal go unpunished. Somehow, some way, she would survive. And when she did, she would make sure everyone knew exactly what kind of man Richard was. Marina didn't know how long she floated in that icy water. It could have been minutes or hours. Everything started to get blurry. The bridge lights multiplied, dancing in front of her like fireflies. She felt her body going numb, a strange sense of peace beginning to take over her. It would be so easy to just close her eyes and let the water carry her away. But something inside her refused to give up. The image of Richard holding Julia as the car fell flashed in her mind like lightning, rekindling the rage that kept her heart beating. Marina forced her eyes open, forced her arms to keep moving, however weakly. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to keep going. That's when she saw a light different from the others. It wasn't the yellowish light of the bridge lamps, but a bright, strong white light that seemed to be approaching. She heard an engine sound, distant voices shouting something she couldn't understand. She tried to wave, but her arms barely came out of the water. She used the last drop of energy she had to scream, a weak, hoarse sound that barely seemed human. The light got closer. Marina felt strong hands holding her arms, pulling her out of the water. Voices spoke to her, asking questions she couldn't answer. Everything became confused again. She remembered being in a boat, someone putting a blanket over her, a male voice telling her to hold on, that they would soon reach the hospital. Then only darkness. When Marina finally opened her eyes again, she was in a completely white room. Fluorescent lights flickered above her, making her eyes sting. She tried to move her head and felt a sharp pain in her neck. There were tubes connected to her arm and the rhythmic sound of a machine beeping beside her. A hospital. She was in a hospital. It took a few seconds for the memories to return. The storm, the car, Richard choosing Julia, the fall, the fight for survival. Marina instinctively brought her, hand to her belly, and a sob escaped her throat when she felt the curve still there. The baby. She needed to know if the baby was okay. She tried to sit up, but her body didn't respond properly. A nurse entered the room at that moment, and her eyes widened when she saw Marina awake. She ran out, calling for a doctor. Seconds later, a man in a white coat rushed in, followed by 2 more nurses. He had grey hair and kind eyes that softened even more when he looked at Marina. "My baby," were the first words Marina could utter, her voice hoarse and painful. The doctor approached, placing his hand on her shoulder reassuringly. "The baby is stable," he said with a tired smile. "Small, but a fighter, just like her mother." Marina felt tears stream down her face. They were alive. Against all odds, they were alive. The doctor, who introduced himself as Dr. Henry Anderson, explained that she had been rescued by a rescue team patrolling the area during the storm. She was suffering from severe hypothermia when she arrived at the hospital, and doctors didn't have much hope she would survive. But she fought, and the baby too. It had been 3 days since the accident. 3 days. Marina let the information sink in. 3 days since Richard had abandoned her. 3 days since her world had collapsed. "Where am I?" she asked, looking around the Spartan room. Dr. Henry explained that she was at Santa Cruz Regional Hospital, a coastal town about 80 miles from San Francisco. The current had carried her far from the bridge, and that's where the rescue team found her. Marina closed her eyes, processing the information. She was far from home, far from Richard, and no one knew who she was. When the doctors asked about her identity, she had no documents, nothing. The car had sunk with her purse inside. She was just a nameless patient, a survivor without a story. It was at that moment that an idea began to form in her mind. An idea so audacious, so absurd, that in normal circumstances she would never consider it. But these were not normal circumstances. Richard had left her to face the situation alone. He had chosen Julia over her. He had abandoned her with their child still in her womb. And now fate was giving her an opportunity, a chance to disappear, to hide, to plan her revenge. When Dr. Henry asked her name, Marina hesitated. She opened her mouth, ready to tell the truth, but the words didn't come out. Instead, she slowly shook her head. "I don't remember," she lied, her voice trembling. "I don't remember anything." The doctor frowned, concerned. He explained that amnesia could be an effect of the trauma, but that it would probably be temporary. He said they would make every effort to discover her identity and contact her family. Marina just nodded, but inside her heart raced. She needed time. Time to think, to plan, to understand what to do next. She couldn't just go back to Richard as if nothing had happened. She couldn't pretend she hadn't seen the choice he made, but she wasn't ready to confront him either. Not yet. The following days were a mixture of physical pain and emotional turmoil. Marina did physical therapy to regain muscle strength, and doctors constantly monitored the baby. Dr. Henry became a constant presence, checking her progress, talking to her about trivialities, trying to help her remember who she was. Marina felt guilty for lying to him, but saw no other option. It was on the 5th night in the hospital that everything changed. Marina was lying in bed, unable to sleep as usual, when she heard voices outside the room. One of them sounded vaguely familiar. Her heart pounded. She turned her head towards the door, watching the shadows passing through the frosted glass. One of the shadows was definitely masculine, tall and broad. Richard. It had to be Richard. Panic took over her. She wasn't ready to see him. Not now. Not like this. Marina pressed the nurse call button urgently. When the young woman entered the room, Marina pointed to the door with trembling hands. "Someone's out there," she whispered. "I don't want to see anyone. Please." The nurse, confused, went to check. She returned a few minutes later, saying it was just a visitor looking for a patient, but that they had already left. Marina couldn't calm down. What if it really was Richard? What if he was looking for her? But then, why would he look in Santa Cruz? He probably thought she was at the bottom of the bay. The idea should bring her some comfort, but it only made the anger burn stronger. Richard believed she was gone. He had moved on with his life with Julia, while she fought for survival. That night, Marina made a decision. She wouldn't reveal her identity. Not yet. She would use that time to fully recover, to have the baby safely. And then, when she was strong enough, she would return, not as a victim, but as a survivor. She would make Richard pay for everything he had done, not with violence, but with the truth, with justice. The next day, Dr. Henry entered her room with a serious expression. "We have someone here who might know you," he said gently. "A man who saw your photo in the missing persons records and thinks it might be your family. Would you like to see him?" Marina's heart almost stopped. Missing persons. So someone had missed her. Someone was looking for her. Marina took a deep breath, trying to control the tremor in her hands. "It could be," she said softly. "But I'm scared. What if it's the wrong person? What if it's someone dangerous?" Dr. Henry nodded understandingly. "I'll be here the whole time," he assured. "If at any point you feel uncomfortable, just let me know and I'll ask the person to leave." When the door opened and the man entered, Marina felt tears well up instantly. It wasn't Richard. It was her brother, Philip. He seemed to have aged years since she last saw him, just 2 weeks earlier. His eyes were sunken, his face marked by fatigue and worry. When their eyes met, Philip let out a sob and ran to the bed, hugging his sister carefully so as not to hurt her. "Marina," he whispered against her hair. "Thank God. I thought I had lost you." Marina clung to her brother, letting the tears fall freely for the first time since the accident. Philip was 3 years older and had always been her protector, her best friend. If there was anyone she could trust at that moment, it was him. Dr. Henry discreetly left the room, giving them privacy. As soon as they were alone, Philip pulled back a little to look at his sister's face. "You're alive," he repeated, as if he still couldn't believe it. "When Richard said you had disappeared in the storm, when they said the car had fallen from the bridge, I thought, it was the end. I spent days looking for you in all the hospitals, in all the medical examiners' offices, nothing. It was only when I saw a news report about an unidentified patient found in Santa Cruz that I thought it might be you." Marina wiped the tears from her face. "Richard told you about the accident," she said, her voice hardening as she pronounced her husband's name. "And what exactly did he say?" Philip frowned, confused by her tone. "He said you were returning from a meeting when the storm started, that the car lost control on the bridge, that you had gotten out of the vehicle to check the tires and when he looked again you had disappeared, that he searched everywhere but couldn't find you." Anger exploded within Marina. "Liar!" She spat the word with so much venom that Philip took a step back. "He's lying, Philip. I didn't get out of the car. I was trapped in the back seat when the car went to the edge of the bridge. And do you know what Richard did? He chose to save Julia. He left me there to face the situation alone. He promised to come back, but he didn't. I saw him running in the opposite direction as the car fell." Philip's face paled. "What? Marina, are you saying Richard abandoned you? That he chose to save another woman instead of you?" Marina nodded and told the whole story. The strange trip to Oakland, Julia's presence, the accident, Richard's hesitation, the terrible choice he made. Every word she uttered made Philip's expression darker. When she finished, Philip had his fists clenched, his jaw locked in anger. "He's going to pay for this," he said. "I'm going to expose that coward for what he is. I'm going to tell everyone what he did." Marina held her brother's arm. "No," she said firmly, "not yet." Philip looked at her confused. "I don't understand. Why do you want to protect him?" "I'm not protecting anyone," Marina explained, "but I need to do this the right way. If I just show up now and tell the truth, he'll say I'm confused, traumatized, making things up. He's very good with words, Philip. You know that. He'll manipulate the situation in his favor. I need evidence. I need a plan. And I need time to recover and have my baby safely." Philip seemed to consider her words. "You want me to pretend I didn't find you," he said slowly, understanding. "You want to stay hidden while you plan your return." Marina nodded. "Exactly. Richard thinks I'm lost. Let him keep thinking that. Meanwhile, I'll recover, I'll have my baby, and I'll gather all the evidence I need. Then I'll make my comeback." "And where will you stay?" Philip asked. "You can't stay in this hospital forever." Marina admitted she hadn't thought about that yet. She had been so focused on surviving day by day that she hadn't planned beyond that. Philip was silent for a moment, thoughtful. "I have a friend here in Santa Cruz," he finally said. "Olivia. I met her at a conference a few years ago. She has a small inn near the beach. I've already talked to her about you, without giving too many details. She said she has a room available and would be happy to help." Marina felt a wave of gratitude for her brother. "You would do that for me?" Philip held her hand. "I'd do anything for you, Marina. You're my sister. And after what Richard did, you deserve justice. I'll help." "You get it." In the following days, Philip visited Marina daily, bringing clothes, books, and news from the outside world. He also brought information about Richard. Apparently, Marina's husband was putting on a public show of grief. He had given interviews to local newspapers, talking about the beloved wife he lost in the storm. He even created a fund in her memory to help victims of traffic accidents. Every piece of news Philip brought made Marina's determination grow. Richard was using her supposed loss to gain public sympathy, to portray himself as a victim. And Julia? Philip said she had withdrawn from public life, refusing interviews. Some speculated she was traumatized by the accident. Others whispered there was something more between her and Richard. Marina knew she was right to wait. If she returned now, it would be her word against his. But if she waited, if she planned carefully, she could destroy his lies in a way that left no doubt. Dr. Henry continued to care for her with admirable dedication. He never pressed about her memory, never questioned her vague answers. He just ensured that she and the baby received the best possible treatment. 2 weeks after reuniting with Philip, Marina was discharged from the hospital. Dr. Henry examined her one last time, checking the baby's heartbeat and Marina's vital signs. Everything seemed stable. "You're a fighter," he said with admiration. "Your baby, too. I've seen many cases in my career, but few as miraculous as yours." Marina thanked him from the bottom of her heart. The doctor had been more than just a professional. He had been a constant presence of support and kindness when she needed it most. Without him, she might not have survived. Without him, the baby might not have survived. Dr. Henry said she could return to the hospital whenever she needed, for prenatal appointments or any emergency. Philip was waiting outside with a car. He drove Marina to Olivia's inn, a small, charming yellow building right in front of the sea. Olivia was a woman in her 50s, with grey hair tied in an elegant bun and warm eyes. She welcomed Marina with a tight hug, as if she had known her for years. The room Olivia prepared for Marina was on the second floor, with a large window overlooking the ocean. It was simple but cozy, with a double bed covered by a colourful patchwork quilt, an antique wooden dresser, and a comfortable armchair near the window. Marina stood there for a long moment, just looking at the sea, listening to the sound of the waves. It was so different from her life in San Francisco, from the modern house she shared with Richard, from the formal dinners and social events. Olivia brought tea and homemade cookies, sitting with Marina on the small balcony next to the room. "Philip told me a little about your situation," she said gently. "You don't need to worry about anything here. You can stay as long as you need. And if you want to talk or just have company, I'll always be around." Marina thanked her, feeling truly grateful for the kindness of strangers when the people who should have loved her had abandoned her. The first few days at the inn were a period of adjustment. Marina woke up early, unable to sleep in. She spent her mornings walking along the deserted beach, feeling the cold sand under her bare feet, letting the sea breeze clear her mind. Her belly was getting bigger, and she felt the baby move more frequently now. Every movement was a reminder that she had survived for a reason. Olivia proved to be a wonderful hostess, respecting Marina's space but always available when she needed company. They started cooking together in the afternoons, and Marina found the activity surprisingly therapeutic. While chopping vegetables or stirring pots, she could temporarily forget about Richard, the betrayal, the accident. She could just exist in the present moment. But the nights were difficult. Marina had recurring nightmares. She dreamed of the car falling from the bridge, of the icy water invading her lungs, of Richard walking away as she screamed for help. She woke up sweaty and trembling, her hand automatically going to her belly to make sure the baby was still there. On one of those nights, Olivia knocked on the door after hearing Marina crying. She entered without saying anything, just sat on the bed and held her hand until she fell back asleep. Philip visited every 3 or 4 days, always bringing news from San Francisco. Richard continued his public performance as a devastated husband. He had participated in a local television program, talking about road safety during storms. He used Marina's face in awareness campaigns. It was nauseating. But Philip also brought more interesting news. An investigative journalist named Arthur Davies had begun to question Richard's version of the accident. He had gained access to surveillance camera footage from the bridge and noticed that there were 3 people in the car, not 2 as Richard claimed. He had published an article with the provocative title, "Who Else Was in the Mercedes That Night?" Marina felt her heart race upon hearing this. The pieces were starting to move. Richard's lie was beginning to crack. Philip showed her the article on his phone. Arthur Davies was young but already had a solid reputation for his meticulous investigations. He had exposed several corruption scandals and now seemed determined to discover the truth about the bridge accident. "This is good," Marina said thoughtfully. "The more people question his story, the less credibility he will have when I finally appear." Philip agreed, "But we need to be careful. If Richard feels cornered, he might do something drastic." Marina knew her brother was right. Richard was proud and controlling. He would not take well to being publicly exposed. As the weeks passed, Marina began to feel stronger. Dr. Henry visited her periodically, conducting prenatal consultations and ensuring that everything was going well with the pregnancy. The baby was growing perfectly, despite the trauma they had been through. "She's a resilient child," the doctor always commented. "She'll be strong like her mother." Marina also began taking notes. She wrote down everything she remembered about that night, the details of the trip, the expressions on Richard's face, the words that were said or unsaid. She wrote about her relationship with Richard over the years, the signs she had ignored, the times he had chosen work or Julia over her. She was building a case, piece by piece. Philip brought more information about Julia. Apparently, she had completely withdrawn from the company she shared with Richard. She no longer appeared at public events. Some said she was ill. Others whispered she had suffered a nervous breakdown. Marina wondered what was really happening. Was Julia remorseful? Was she scared? Or was she just trying to hide from the truth? One afternoon, Philip brought news that changed everything. Authorities had recovered the car from the bottom of the bay. They were conducting a full forensic analysis, and they had found something interesting. A partial recording from an internal camera that Richard had installed in the vehicle to monitor driving. The recording was water damaged, but specialists were trying to recover what they could. Marina felt a shiver run down her spine. A recording. It could be the definitive proof she needed. If they could recover the audio or video from that night, it would be impossible for Richard to deny what he had done. Philip saw the expression on her face. "This could be your chance," he said, "but we need to be ready. When this recording comes out, if it does, things will happen fast that night." For the first time since she arrived at the inn, Marina turned on the television in her room. She searched through the channels until she found a local news program from San Francisco. And there he was, Richard. His face filled the entire screen, his eyes feigning sadness as he spoke about the beloved wife he had lost. Marina felt the anger burn in her chest, but forced herself to watch. She needed to see what he was saying, how he was presenting himself. The reporter asked about speculations that there was a third person in the car. Richard hesitated for only a fraction of a second before answering. "Yes, there was, my business partner, Julia Costa. We were returning from a meeting when the storm caught us. It was a terrible night that changed our lives forever." He wiped a non-existent tear from the corner of his eye. "Losing Marina was the most devastating blow I have ever received." Marina turned off the television so hard she almost broke the remote control. She couldn't watch anymore. Seeing Richard lie so brazenly, using her name, feigning grief for the wife he had abandoned, was too much. She placed her hands over her belly, feeling the baby kick hard, as if also reacting to her mother's anger. "Calm down," she whispered, to both the baby and herself. "Our time will come." The following weeks passed in a kind of haze. Marina continued her routine of beach walks, meals with Olivia, and planning sessions with Philip. The baby was growing rapidly now, and she was entering her 8th month of pregnancy. Dr. Henry said everything was progressing perfectly, but recommended she stay close to the hospital in case labor started early. It was on a June night during another storm that the contractions began. Marina woke up with a sharp pain in her abdomen, so intense it made her scream. Olivia heard and rushed to the room, finding Marina doubled over in pain, holding her belly. "I'll call Dr. Henry," she said, already picking up the phone. Marina just nodded, unable to speak. The doctor arrived in less than 20 minutes, wet from the rain, carrying his medical bag. He examined Marina quickly, and his face became serious. "The baby is coming," he said, "and it's coming now. The storm is too strong to take you to the hospital. We'll have to do this here." Marina felt panic begin to rise, but Dr. Henry's calm, confident gaze reassured her. "You can do this," he said firmly. "You've survived worse." The birth was long and difficult. Marina had never felt so much pain in her life. Olivia held her hand, offering words of encouragement. Dr. Henry worked efficiently, guiding Marina through each contraction, each moment of unbearable pain. Outside, the storm roared. The wind rattled the windows. The rain beat on the roof. It was as if nature was witnessing the birth of this child who had survived against all odds. When the baby's cry finally filled the room, Marina felt a wave of emotion so strong she thought her heart would explode. Dr. Henry cleaned the tiny creature and placed her in Marina's arms. "A girl," he announced with a smile. "Small, but with strong lungs." Marina looked at her daughter's red, wrinkled face and felt tears stream down her face. "Hello, my love," she whispered. "You're here." But the joy was quickly replaced by concern when Dr. Henry noticed the baby was having difficulty breathing. He worked quickly, using equipment he had brought, monitoring oxygen levels. Olivia kept Marina calm while the doctor attended to the child. After what seemed like hours but was only minutes, the baby's breathing stabilized. "She'll be fine," Dr. Henry assured. "She just needed a little help at the beginning." Marina held her daughter against her chest, feeling the tiny heart beating against hers. "I'll call you Helen," she decided, "because you are my light, my hope." Olivia wiped her own tears. "It's a beautiful name," she said. Marina agreed. Helen was the name of her grandmother, the strongest woman she had known. It seemed appropriate. The following days were a mixture of exhaustion and joy. Marina learned to breastfeed, to change diapers, to calm the baby's crying in the middle of the night. Olivia was an invaluable help, showing Marina techniques she had learned raising her own children. Dr. Henry visited daily, monitoring both Marina and Helen, ensuring they were both recovering well. Philip arrived 2 days after the birth, carrying bags full of baby clothes, diapers, and other supplies. When he saw his niece for the first time, his face lit up. "She's perfect," he said with admiration. "She looks like you." Marina smiled. "And she has her father's eyes," she admitted, despite not wanting to. Helen had Richard's same dark brown eyes, but Marina decided she wouldn't let that spoil her joy. Helen was hers, only hers. With Helen's birth, something changed in Marina. The anger was still there, the need for justice still burned strong, but now she had an even greater reason to fight. It wasn't just about her. It was about ensuring her daughter grew up knowing the truth. It was about ensuring Helen never had to carry the shame of her father's actions. Philip brought important news during that visit. The journalist Arthur Davies had managed to recover part of the recording from the car's internal camera. The quality wasn't perfect, but you could see and hear fragments of what happened that night. Arthur was planning to publish a series of reports exposing the inconsistencies in Richard's story. But more than that, he was looking for witnesses, for anyone who might have information about the accident. "This is your chance," Philip said. "If Arthur is investigating, you could contact him. Tell your story. With your eyewitness account and the partial recording, it would be impossible for Richard to keep lying." Marina considered the idea as she rocked Helen to sleep. It made sense, but there were also risks. Once she revealed she was alive, there would be no turning back. Richard would know, and she wasn't sure how he would react. "I need a lawyer first," Marina decided. "Someone who can help me navigate this legally. I don't just want to expose Richard publicly. I want to ensure he never has rights over Helen. I want to ensure he pays for the consequences of his actions." Philip nodded. "I know someone. A lawyer in San Francisco specializing in family cases and public litigation. Dr. Rebecca Thompson. She's good, Marina, and she's discreet." Marina scheduled a meeting with Dr. Rebecca Thompson at a discreet cafe in Santa Cruz, away from the curious eyes of San Francisco. Philip would take care of Helen while she was out. It was the first time Marina had been away from her daughter since birth, and every fiber of her being protested against it. But she had to do it. For Helen. For their future. Rebecca was an impressive woman. She must have been around 40, with black hair tied in an elegant ponytail and shrewd eyes that seemed to analyze everything. She wore a navy blue suit that conveyed professionalism and authority. When Marina approached the table, Rebecca stood up and extended her hand. "Marina Alves, I presume," she said. "Philip told me a lot about you, and about your extraordinary situation." They sat down, and Marina told the whole story again. Every detail of the accident, Richard's choice, the miraculous survival, the months in hiding. Rebecca listened attentively, making occasional notes in a leather notebook. When Marina finished, the lawyer was silent for a long moment, processing the information. "This is a complex case," Rebecca finally said. "Legally, we have several fronts. First, there's the issue of Helen's custody. Richard is biologically the father, but his abandonment during the accident and his subsequent lies can be used to limit or eliminate his parental rights. Second, there's the issue of attempted failure to render aid, although this is complicated because technically he had no legal obligation to save her. Third, there are the financial implications. Does Richard have access to your accounts, your assets?" Marina nodded slowly. "We have a joint account, and the house is in both our names." Rebecca frowned. "So he potentially has access to everything that is yours. And if he officially declares you missing, he might try to take full control. We need to act before that happens." Marina felt a chill. She hadn't thought of that. Richard could be trying to seize her assets while she was in hiding. "But we have trump cards," Rebecca continued, her voice growing firmer. "We have you. Alive. With a child who survived the trauma. We have Dr. Henry's medical testimony about your condition when you were rescued. And if we get that recording the journalist found, we have visual proof. More importantly, if Julia Costa is willing to testify about what really happened that night, we'll have a solid case." Marina hesitated. "Do you think Julia would testify? She was there. She saw everything, but it would be against her own interests." Rebecca gave a small smile. "People do surprising things when guilt weighs too heavily. Let me investigate. I have my contacts." Marina agreed, feeling for the first time in months that maybe, just maybe, she had a real chance at justice. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Rebecca worked tirelessly, gathering evidence, preparing documents, making contacts. She obtained statements from Dr. Henry and the rescue team that found Marina. She obtained complete medical records, showing the extent of her injuries and the miracle of her survival. She even got photos of the car recovered from the bay, showing the back seat where Marina had been trapped. Philip brought more news about Richard. Apparently, he had indeed initiated proceedings to officially declare Marina missing. He claimed he needed to close financial matters and move on with his life. The hypocrisy was nauseating. Marina remembered all the times Richard had spoken about eternal love, about never abandoning her. And now, just months later, he was trying to erase her completely. But the biggest surprise came when Rebecca managed to contact Julia. The lawyer arranged a discreet meeting and returned with unexpected news. "She will testify," Rebecca said, almost incredulously. "Julia has been tormented by guilt since the accident. Apparently, Richard convinced her that you were already lost when they left the car, that there was nothing they could do. But she never fully believed it, and when she learned Richard was trying to seize your assets, that was the last straw. Marina didn't know how to feel. Part of her was furious with Julia for having participated in that terrible night. But another part recognized that Julia was also a victim of Richard's manipulations, and if her testimony helped expose the truth, Marina was willing to accept it. Arthur Davies, the investigative journalist, also made contact through Rebecca. He had managed to restore a significant part of the car's recording. It didn't show the exact moment of the accident, but it showed the minutes before. It showed Richard and Julia having a heated discussion while Marina was unconscious in the back seat. It showed Richard saying something about having to make a choice. It was circumstantial, but powerful. Marina watched the recording on Rebecca's laptop, her stomach churning. Seeing Richard there, so vivid, so real, brought all the emotions back. The pain, the anger, the feeling of betrayal. But it also brought determination. That man wouldn't win, not this time. Rebecca presented a plan. They would hold a press conference. Marina would appear publicly, alive, with Helen. They would present all the evidence at once, the medical reports, the partial recording, Julia's testimony, Arthur's investigation. It would be impossible for Richard to deny or manipulate the narrative. He would be exposed for exactly what he was, a man who abandoned his pregnant wife to save his mistress. The press conference was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in the auditorium of the San Francisco Convention Center. Rebecca had strategically chosen the location, large enough to accommodate the media, but with enough security to protect Marina and Helen. Philip had returned with Marina to the city, settling them in a discreet hotel the night before. Marina barely slept. Lying in the hotel bed, with Helen sleeping peacefully in the crib beside her, Marina mentally rehearsed everything she was going to say. She had practiced her speech dozens of times with Rebecca, but she was still nervous. It would be the first time she saw Richard since that terrible night on the bridge, the first time she confronted him with the truth. She didn't know how she would react to seeing him, if she would manage to maintain her composure or if she would break down. Philip knocked on the door early in the morning, bringing coffee and pastries. "Are you ready?" he asked, and it wasn't really a question. Marina nodded, though she wasn't sure she was. She put on a simple but elegant outfit Rebecca had suggested. Black pants and a white blouse. Nothing too flashy. She wanted people to focus on her words, not her appearance. She picked Helen up, took a deep breath, and left the room. The drive to the convention center felt both infinitely long and terribly short. Marina watched the city through the car window, recognizing familiar places she hadn't seen in months. The bakery where she used to buy bread, the park where she walked on Sundays, the bridge where her life had changed forever. Everything seemed both familiar and completely strange. Rebecca met them at the back entrance of the convention center. Everything was ready. The room was full of reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers. Arthur Davies was there, ready to present his investigation. Julia had arrived earlier and was in a separate room, waiting her turn to speak. And Richard was also present. He had been invited under the pretext of an update on the accident investigation. He had no idea what was about to happen. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Rebecca asked one last time. "Once you enter that room, there's no turning back." Marina looked at Helen, who looked back at her with those big, innocent eyes. "I'm sure," she said firmly. "For her, for me, for the truth." Rebecca nodded and opened the door. The buzz in the room ceased instantly when Marina entered. You could hear a pin drop. All the cameras turned towards her. Marina scanned the room until she found Richard. He was sitting in the front row wearing a dark suit. When their eyes met, his face turned white as paper. He rose from his chair, mouth open, eyes wide. "Marina," he whispered, but the nearby microphone picked up the sound and echoed through the room. Marina walked to the podium with firm steps, holding Helen carefully. Rebecca briefly introduced her. "This is Marina Alves. Many of you know her as the woman who disappeared during the March storm on the Golden Gate Bridge. As you can see, she did not disappear. She survived, and she is here today to tell her story." Marina adjusted the microphone, looked directly at the cameras, and began to speak. Her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger as she continued. She spoke of the strange trip to Oakland, of the storm, of the accident. She spoke of the car losing control, of being trapped in the back seat as the vehicle slid towards the edge of the bridge. And then, with a firm and clear voice, she spoke of the choice Richard made. "My husband had to decide," she said, each word heavy with emotion. "I was trapped in the car. Julia Costa was outside, safe. He could have tried to get me out of the vehicle. But he didn't try. He chose to take Julia away and leave me behind." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Cameras began flashing intensely, focusing alternately on Marina and Richard. Richard stood up abruptly. "That's not true," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Marina, you're confused. You hit your head. You don't know what you're saying. I tried to save you. I tried." Marina stared at him coldly. "Then why did you let me fall with the car? Why did you run in the opposite direction? Why did you abandon me, Richard?" Before he could answer, Rebecca signaled to Arthur. The journalist approached the podium with a laptop. "We have evidence," he said, his voice professional but clearly emotional. "This is the partial recording recovered from the car's internal camera. See for yourselves." The large screen behind the podium lit up, showing the grainy but recognizable image of the car's interior. The room watched in absolute silence as the recording played. You could see Richard and Julia talking urgently, while Marina was unconscious in the back seat. The audio was distorted, but some words were clear. "I have to choose," Richard said. "I can't save both." The image cut, skipped a few frames, and then showed the moment the car began to slide. Julia screaming, Richard hesitating, and then both running out of the car. The silence after the recording ended was deafening. Then, like a wave, the room exploded into a chaos of shouted questions, camera flashes, and general confusion. Richard stood in the midst of it all, looking like a man whose world had just collapsed. Because that was exactly what had happened. All the lies, all the pretense, everything was crumbling before his eyes. Rebecca raised her hand for silence. "We have one more witness," she announced. "Julia Costa is here and would like to make a statement." The side door opened and Julia entered. She looked years older than the last time Marina had seen her. She was too thin, with deep dark circles under her eyes and visibly trembling hands. She walked to the microphone without looking at Richard. "Everything Marina said is true," Julia began, her voice low but clear. "I was there. I saw Richard hesitate. I saw him choose to save me instead of trying to get Marina out of the car." She paused, wiping away the tears that began to fall. "He told me she was already lost, that there was nothing we could do, but I knew it was a lie. I saw her face in the window. I saw her screaming for help, and I did nothing. I turned my back and ran." Richard finally found his voice. "You're lying," he shouted, pointing at Julia. "Both of you are lying. This is a conspiracy. I loved my wife. I tried to save her." But his words sounded empty, desperate. No one in the room believed him. The evidence was too clear, the testimony too consistent. Marina felt Helen stir in her arms and look down, meeting her daughter's eyes. That small life that had survived against all odds. That child Richard would never know, never hold, never call his daughter. It was a loss, but it was a just consequence. The following days were a whirlwind. The story spread like wildfire, dominating headlines across the country. Marina Alves, the woman who returned from the storm, the abandoned wife who survived to tell the truth. Reporters camped outside the hotel where Marina was staying. Cameras followed her wherever she went, but Rebecca and Philip formed a protective shield, ensuring she and Helen had privacy when they needed it. Authorities opened a formal investigation into Richard's actions during the accident. Although it was complicated to prosecute someone for not saving another person, his subsequent lies and attempt to seize Marina's assets constituted clear offenses. More importantly, Rebecca filed a petition to completely remove Richard's parental rights over Helen. The court hearing took place 2 weeks after the press conference. Marina attended with Helen in her arms, Philip and Rebecca by her side. Richard was there with his own lawyer, but seemed defeated before it even began. The judge heard both sides, reviewed the evidence, and made his decision. Based on Ms. Alves's documented abandonment during the accident, the false statements made by Mr. Cardoso, and the best interest of the child, I determine that Richard Cardoso shall have no legal rights over the minor Helen Alves. Furthermore, I recommend that the competent authorities proceed with investigations into possible failure to render aid and identity fraud. Marina felt something release within her when she heard the verdict. It wasn't exactly joy, but it was relief, justice, closure. Richard tried to speak to her as they left the courtroom, but Philip stepped between them. "You've done enough harm," he said firmly. "Leave my sister alone." Richard looked at Marina over Philip's shoulder, his eyes full of something that might have been regret. But it was too late for regrets. Marina decided to return to Santa Cruz. San Francisco held too many painful memories, and she wanted a new beginning for herself and Helen. Olivia welcomed her with open arms, offering not only the room at the inn, but unconditional friendship and support. Dr. Henry continued to monitor Helen's development, marveling at how the little one who was born with complications was growing strong and healthy. Life in Santa Cruz was simple, but deeply satisfying. Marina woke to the sound of the waves, had breakfast on the balcony while Helen played with her toys. They walked on the beach every afternoon, and Marina felt peace, slowly returning to her soul. The anger was still there, probably always would be on some level, but it no longer controlled her. She had gotten what she wanted. The truth had come out. Justice had been served. A month after the hearing, Marina received a letter. The sender was Richard. She held the envelope for a long time, staring at the familiar handwriting. Olivia asked if she was going to open it. Marina shook her head. "I don't need to," she said simply. "I have nothing to say to him, and there is nothing he can say that will change what happened." She tore the letter without opening it and threw the pieces in the trash. It was a symbolic act of liberation. Philip visited regularly, always bringing gifts for Helen and stories to make Marina laugh. He said Richard had left San Francisco, too ashamed to remain in the city where everyone knew his story. The company had gone bankrupt without him and Julia to manage it. Julia had also moved to somewhere inland, trying to rebuild her life away from the scandal. Marina didn't care what happened to them. Her life now was about Helen, about rebuilding, about finding joy in the small things. The first time Helen laughed, her first step, her first word, which was Mommy. Each milestone was a celebration of the life that was almost taken from them. On a particularly beautiful afternoon, Marina was sitting on the beach with Helen in her lap, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. She thought of everything she had been through, the storm, the fall, the fight for survival, the months in hiding, the confrontation with Richard. It had been a painful and terrifying journey, but she had survived, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. Helen pointed to a seagull flying above them and Marina smiled. "Seabird?" she said softly. "Beautiful, isn't it?" The little girl clapped her hands, delighted. Marina hugged her tighter, feeling her heart overflow with love. This was her future now. Not what she had planned, not what she had imagined when she married Richard all those years ago. But it was real, it was honest, and it was hers. And as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to appear in the sky, Marina made a silent promise to herself and to Helen. She would never again let anyone define her worth. She would never again remain silent in the face of injustice. And above all, she would raise her daughter knowing that truth, courage, and love were more powerful than any storm. Dear listeners, we hope Marina and Helen's journey has deeply touched your hearts. This story of survival, courage, and justice reminds us that even in life's most violent storms, we can find strength to move forward and seek the truth. If this narrative moved you as much as it moved us in telling it, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories that explore the complexity and resilience of the human spirit. Leave a like if Marina inspired you with her determination, and tell us in the comments which moment stood out the most. We have a special playlist with other equally touching stories waiting for you right here. Every day we bring new narratives that celebrate strength, love, and truth. We look forward to seeing you in the comments to share your reflections on this incredible story.